We are joined by Ismail Momoniat, who is the head of the SA delegation to the FATF. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure, Heidi.
We do appreciate it. Everyone wants to know, is South Africa going to be off the grey list? Maybe at the end of that answer, you could just tell us why it was so bad that we were put on that grey list in the first place.
Okay. Look, we're likely to exit the grey list next week, Friday. If you just look at the FATF process, we've dealt with the 22 action items, and we've already had the site visit that was done at the end of July. And now there's a report that's out, and it's gone to all the members of the FATF, and the plenary will consider it, and we expect the plenary to approve it. So the formal decision will only be made on Friday, next week Friday, 24th October. And once the FATF president announces the outcome at the end of that meeting, on that evening, then it will be public news.
Why was it so bad that South Africa was on that grey list?
Okay, the technical reasons are that firstly, our laws were not in place. FATF has 40 standards, it calls them recommendations, and we were deemed to only comply with 20 of the 40. But more than that, there were 11 measures that measure implementation, called effectiveness, okay? And in South Africa, we're great at implementation, so we passed all 11. No, actually, we failed all 11, okay? And so, and that was actually the much stronger reason, because we're so poor at implementing our own laws on anti-money laundering, terror financing, we got grey listed. But the underlying reason is really because of state capture. State capture weakened our institutions, whether it was some of our regulators, whether it was some of, especially our law enforcement agencies, the prosecuting agency. And so our ability to investigate crimes like money laundering, like all other crimes, were very weak, almost non-existent.
I want us to move over to becoming cashless. The SARB said it's not about becoming cashless, but becoming cash smart. Would you say that it's wrong to think that moving away from cash will actually solve our problems?
No, moving away from cash will not by itself solve our problems. If you take state capture, you've had, for example, the Zondo Commission revealed the Bosasa cash payments. The Guptas certainly were tried to
Bags of cash.
to give a bag of cash to Deputy Minister KBC Jonas at the time. So that's one type of crime. But a lot of the kickbacks were done through the banking system. So, and even they've gotten away with their crimes after state capture, okay, or many of them haven't been charged as yet. So a lot of criminality still takes place. The guy 2 weeks ago with 3 blue Lamborghinis, okay, he was getting paid from the procurement system. There was no secret. He allegedly won tenders and he got paid for it. So we know where the money went. But in our system, though we've seized his assets, and that's what? 4 years after Babita Deokaran was murdered, and these crimes happened a bit before. And, the persons whose assets are seized, many of them are still not arrested for their criminal, for any criminal transgressions. So our system works far too slowly, clearly. And so coming to your question, a lot of these crimes are blatant. So whether we move away from cash or not, yes, if we move away, there's hopefully more fingerprints to follow up. I saw one of the speakers, she mentioned that when you look at AI and how it's used, it should firstly, these things are very complicated,
Yes.
that companies it must be explainable. They should be able to understand what their system is doing. And two, it should be auditable. There should be an audit trail. So those things are going to be quite important. That doesn't mean to say it will be good to obviously have less cash in the economy and more online payments. It was just better for um, uh, everybody else. But we need to be mindful. Many low income households actually prefer cash, and that may be due to other reasons like the charges and costs of doing digital payments may be far higher. They may not have smartphones, they may not have internet. It might be age that they're not, used to doing these things.
Yeah.
So there'll always be some people who want to use cash, and that's why you can't eliminate it, but you can certainly reduce the 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 share of cash in the economy. And certainly for big payments, I think we should consider. I see no reason why for big payments they shouldn't be forced to make their payments electronically and not in cash, so that you deal with the bosasas and of this world.
They always find a way, don't they? That's the big concern here.
Organized crime is like water. They know how to get around. And so you got to have a pretty robust system to fight them.
I want to move over to how important it is to be transparent and compliant, especially to what led South Africa to be on the grey list. I mean, globally, it's almost as though people did not want to touch South Africa. There were major concerns around transacting with South Africa because we were on this grey list, which obviously affected payments, it affected FDI, it affected a number of elements. Having looked at what's going on with the grey listing and the extensive work that needed to go into it, why is it so important for accountability and transparency?
Look, accountability and transparency are important for their own sake, right? And transparency, I mean, in our system, we are quite transparent generally. But as I said, even transparency alone doesn't mean that you act against that criminality. I think building institutions and making sure that they can act and act quickly is critical for any system. There needs to be consequences, and they can't be delayed for too long to get the system functioning. Being grey listed obviously was humiliating for the country, and to get grey listed demonstrated that something, our anti-money laundering system was broken, that our ability to deal with crime and corruption was weak. And that meant that banks, for example, today in the world with the FATF requirements, the aim is to ensure that your financial system is not abused by drug cartels, narcotic cartels, and so on, transnational crimes. So they would want to know that your systems in your country are up to scratch, because if a bank from another country tries to deal with a bank here, and they can't place reliance on our system, they themselves expose themselves to penalties, even criminal transgressions possibly in their own country. So the system's pretty powerful, and if we as South Africa fail the test, there would be consequences. But having said that, being grey listed certainly had an adverse impact. But in a way, grey listing means that you're a jurisdiction that's under increased monitoring. You've agreed to increase monitoring. And so if we had stayed there longer than, say, 2+ years, which we were given, then I think the consequences begin to get worse. The consequences initially were bad, but the consequences would get worse if, let's say, we just took a blasé attitude and said, we don't care, we'll remain on the grey list, we don't want to do things to get out of it. Then we would be in real trouble. The fact that we were seen to cooperate and we were doing everything to get out of it sort of mitigated, I think, a negative reaction against us or our financial institutions. But had we stayed there longer, that would have become far worse.
I want to speak about the critical reforms and perhaps policy that is needed. And I don't know if I could put it in the context of how many are still financially excluded in this country and are unbanked. I mean, you mentioned the fact that there could be a number of reasons, where they are, age, whatever the dynamics might be, but how critical it is for there to be reforms and for there to be a relook at certain policies to ensure that there is that financial literacy and financial inclusion for all, even those in underprivileged areas.
Look, South Africa took a lot of steps to. Remember, we had the old Zanzi banking accounts after '94, in early 2000s, to try and make sure that everyone has access to banking. And I think generally we've made good steps when it comes to the banking side, and to make sure that the charges on low-income households were low, okay, or zero in many cases. Having said that, you also got to see financial inclusion with other, with whether people have jobs, whether they're able to earn an income. You know, you can
Yes.
have access to a bank account, but if you don't have any money, what's the point? And so, it's got to be part of a set of policies. As you know, we've got very high unemployment rate, what, about 33%.
Very low
And
economic
our
growth.
and ever since state capture, we've been crippled with just growth in 0 to 1% mediocre growth. The population's growing faster, and so you got to, financial inclusion will improve if more people have jobs and they are earning an income. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle. If you have rising unemployment and people don't have money, you're going to find that financial inclusion will not work because people are not able to use those banking accounts in a productive way because and in today's world, if you don't have a banking account, it's very difficult to even sort of do whatever, whether it's when you get employment or even if you do piecemeal work, to get paid. It helps to have some sort of financial account to receive those funds.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Hope we get off that grey list by Friday.
No, we will.